I would say a lot of the children that I work with who've got a diagnosis of autism have got a comorbid diagnosis of ADHD as well. In fact, I think the school that I was head teacher, about 50% of our children had a secondary diagnosis of ADHD too. I think out of all the work that I do, and I do lots of training, I work with lots of professionals, I work with lots of parents, I work with lots of young people, I actually find the siblings workshops probably the most worthwhile. That's the one where I get the emails maybe 2 or 3 months later from parents saying, wow, that really did make a difference actually, you know, my neurotypical child is handling the meltdowns and handling the behaviour much, much better. So I think it's really important that siblings are made aware of their brothers or sisters' conditions. Right, so this is what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to look at the impact of ADHD on siblings, look at behaviour that challenges the whole family, look at ways that we can build resilience, and then just I put in here a section of where to find support, but I don't think I need that anymore because I think Alistair's pretty much covered that. Something else actually I will just add is I'm pretty sure that I have ADHD myself. When James was diagnosed, and we went through, you know, the doctor went through it all, he said it's very likely that one of James's parents has ADHD. I thought, yeah, that's me. And the more I learn about ADHD now, I think, yeah, that is definitely me. In fact, I went to a meeting recently where I've never been so bored in my entire life, honestly, and I could feel myself, it's like I needed to run. I actually had to go to the toilet because I couldn't bear sitting in this room for another minute. I could almost feel myself, my heart rate was going, and it was yeah, I thought, that's another thing. But looking back on myself as a child, I did loads of gymnastics and trampolining when I was younger. I used to watch television sitting upside down. Yeah. So there's lots of signs that I probably do have ADHD. So I found some research on ADHD. I found a website, and it said, I think you probably all, this is a quote I've put in here, but I'm sure it's all very, very relevant to you, that ADHD has a significant impact on the siblings of children who have the condition. One study found that 1 of 13 siblings interviewed thought that they were severely and negatively affected by living with a sibling with ADHD. Okay, so I think, you know, you probably knew that already, but you've got it there in black and white. This is some of the behaviour then that we know that siblings are affected by is the physical and verbal aggression that children with ADHD can sometimes display. The out of control hyperactivity. I had a very good experience of this myself. On Saturday night we went round to some friends for a little fireworks party, and there were 6 children there. My son was the second eldest, with quite young, you know, younger children, and I spoke to them in the car and I said, look, you know, there's going to be 2 little girls there, and you know, they might be quite shy. And within 10 minutes of getting there, my eldest son was wrestling, and it was, you know, I actually felt really embarrassed, and I was like, James, just, for goodness sakes, you know, but I was like, you're 14 now, but I think it was because he was feeling quite anxious, and I probably made it worse by saying to him, Carl, you know, you must behave when we get there. And I think when I get embarrassed, he feeds off that too. Okay. Emotional and social immaturity. I'm seeing a bit of a catch-up now with James, actually. And I'll tell you why I think that is in a minute. But yeah, I think in the past I would definitely have described him as emotionally and socially immature. Academic underachievement and the learning difficulties, and I think what I've seen is very much the impact of James's behaviour at school on my youngest son. And I've even had comments at parents' evenings when I've gone to speak to them about my younger child say, oh, Finn's not like James, is he? Well, no, he's not, because he's not James, he's a completely different child. And actually one of the things that was very, very difficult was when my youngest son was in year 4 and James had just gone off to his secondary school. My youngest son completely fell apart. He went from being a child that I could drop in the drop zone and just drive off to almost school refusing, having panic attacks in the car, and having to be literally led, almost dragged into school, met by his TA in reception and taken into school. He wouldn't go to assembly anymore either. When we finally unpicked it, which took months, it was because James had left, and he said, Mrs. O'Neill, who was the head teacher, Mrs. O'Neill thinks James is a really naughty boy, and now she must think that I'm a naughty boy too. And it was because James had gone, my youngest son felt that the spotlight would now be on him. the irony was when we said this to the teacher, the head teacher didn't even know who Finn was, because actually he was such a good boy. He hadn't really come to her attention. But that was the root cause of his anxiety. My brother's labelled a naughty boy, therefore they're going to think I'm a naughty boy too. We also know that having a child with ADHD can cause a lot of conflict within families. It can cause a lot of arguments. I'm in my second marriage. My husband is amazing, but he has 2 daughters who are neurotypical, so he sometimes finds James's behaviour very, very difficult, and we will sometimes clash because I have a very different parenting approach to him, because he's got these 2 grown-up daughters. Poor peer relationships. I know that James has actually struggled a little bit with the fact that Finn, I can drop my youngest son off anywhere and he'll just make friends, and I think James sometimes gets very jealous about that because he struggles more, and then he'll take it out on Finn. The other thing that I learned was an absolute nightmare was if Finn, my younger son, had a play date when he was little, and I ended up with 3 children in the house, James would always somehow sabotage Finn's play dates. It was just enough. So I either didn't have them, or I made sure that James had a friend round, so there was 4 of them, because having 3 in the house was just a total disaster. And then there can be difficult relationships with extended families as well, because actually my parents are brilliant. I can't fault my parents, but I know a lot of the families that I work with, there are difficulties often with the older generations who just think there's no such thing and it's just about parenting, and they'll make really unhelpful comments as well. So then you might think, actually the only way I can deal with this is by cutting myself off from some of these family members, and then that obviously impacts on your own family. So the further impact of ADHD on siblings is some siblings describe their family life as chaotic, exhausting and focused on their sibling. Siblings describe never knowing what to expect next, and that they did not expect an end point to the impact of ADHD on their lives. It's just, ongoing, it's never going to end. Siblings of children with ADHD experience the disruptive effects of the condition in 3 ways: victimisation, caretaking and feelings of sorrow and loss. They're reported feeling victimised through physical violence, verbal aggression and manipulative and controlling behaviour, and many siblings felt unprotected by their parents, who are perceived as too exhausted or overwhelmed to intervene. And I'm sure, again, a lot of you can really, really relate to that. So I think if that sounds familiar to you, you're not alone, and sometimes I think you can just take comfort in that. This is why these groups are so amazing. It's because you realise that you're not the only person that's going through it. So yeah, while I was downstairs last week preparing this PowerPoint, I thought, actually, I've got a really good source of information in my house about what it's like to live with a brother or sister with autism. So I went upstairs and had a little chat with Finn. And I said, Finn, come and talk to me. What's it like having a brother like James sometimes? What's it like having a brother with ADHD? And he said, he goes so over the top. And he does. And that's exactly what happened at this fireworks party on... Oh, James came up with a brilliant idea on Saturday as well, of holding a firework while it was going off. One of the ones that sounds like a pop, pop, pop. And so he was saying, Mum, it's all right, isn't it, if I hold the firework? And I'm like, no, it's not. It's really not okay. A lot of it was bravado and, look at me, I can hold a fire. He didn't hold the firework. He's embarrassing sometimes. He is. I get embarrassed sometimes because of James's behaviour, so I know Finn really does as well. When he gets told to do something, he always negotiates. And he doesn't go to bed. And I know, actually, melatonin has kind of saved us, actually, but it was a real difficult... James not going to bed, and he would probably get up and go to the toilet 4 times an hour, and the bathroom was next to Finn's bedroom, so every time he'd get up it would disturb Finn, and when Finn's anxiety was really bad and he couldn't sleep, it was this vicious circle. But I also said to Finn, what are the good things about having a brother like James? And he said, he's loyal and he looks after me. And I'm going to get emotional now because Finn got diagnosed with a really serious and rare neurological condition in March, and it's been awful. And we've spent a lot of time in hospital. Finn's been out of school for 6 months. It's been really, really hard. But the one person that really stepped up was James. He's been amazing. He's been absolutely amazing. He waits for Finn every single day after school and he walks him home. And the other week I was driving back from Birmingham and I got stuck in traffic on the M25. And James rang me up and he said, "Don't worry, Mum." He said, "I've put him to bed and I've made him a drink. I'll look after him until you get home." So when my son's school ring me up and say that James's behaviour is unacceptable, that he's disruptive and he's doing all these things, I say, well, no, actually, this is my son. And actually, having Finn being ill has just absolutely made me realise what an amazing kid James is. And I said to the school, maybe what you need to do actually is give James a responsibility. Because I've never known a boy step up like James has. It's been the making of him. Sorry, you're all crying now. So yeah. Didn't need to do that. Anyway, so he is amazing, and I have to say they're so close. And I know, yes, they'll have the odd punch up and they'll beat each other up sometimes, but generally they're brilliant together. They're so close. And as I say, that James has just been amazing since Finn got sick. He has got a lot of energy, and one of the things that Finn's got to do is keep fit. This is part of his condition. It's really important that he keeps fit. He's meant to do 20 minutes of exercise every day, and sometimes he really doesn't want to do it because he's so exhausted. And last night they came home from school, we just bought them a punch bag for the garden, and James and Finn, they came home and it was James that was like, "Come on, Finn, let's go outside." And he's like raring to go, killing this punch bag. And he was the one that got Finn out there doing it. So sometimes I love that energy that he's got. It's amazing. And he is very, very funny, I have to say. He's got the most amazing sense of humour, and he just makes us all laugh. So actually I probably should have put more positive stuff in there as well, but I thought that was really, really important, that it's not always negative. I think one of the best things that you can do is teach your children about ADHD. There's a fantastic book, I'm sure you've all heard of it, which is Can I Tell You About ADHD? By Susan Yanni. It's a really good book. There's also All Dogs Have ADHD. Yeah. That's also fantastic. About last year, I was doing my autism Sibling support group, and I didn't have anyone to look after the boys, and I do the group in a hall in Horsley. And because it was I was doing the courses in half term so that the children can come along, and I said to the boys, "Look, I'm doing this course, it's only an hour, why don't you play in the park and I can sort of keep an eye on you." So I dropped them off and they were playing in the park, and then it absolutely poured down with rain. These two little faces appeared at the window, and I said, "Well, come in, just come in." So they came and they joined this group, and one of the really interesting things that we did in the group was we did an iceberg theory of behaviour. So I don't know if you've heard of the iceberg theory of behaviour, but it's basically teaching us that what we see is the tip of the iceberg, and only 10% of an iceberg is actually visible. The rest is under the surface. And we did this exercise where the children had to put down on the tip of the iceberg what the observable behaviours were, and then underneath the water they had to say what was driving it. And it was such a brilliant activity to do because my kids did it as well. And actually, Finn's not perfect. This is before he was diagnosed, but Finn's an anxious child, and because he's anxious sometimes becomes very demand avoidant and quite challenging in himself. But actually teaching the boys that actually what they're seeing is a direct result of what's going on under the surface was a really, really useful exercise. But yeah, educate them as much as you can about the condition. Talk about famous people with ADHD. So Alistair, the event that you're putting on, I've put that in my diary actually, because again, I think it's so important for children to realise that this isn't necessarily a disability. It doesn't have to be negative. Actually, there's lots and lots of really successful people out there who have ADHD. Lots of our entrepreneurs, for example, have ADHD. So make it a positive thing. So I've mentioned the iceberg here, but I think it's really important that siblings understand that ADHD is not a choice and it's a condition. Okay, I know that sometimes James has no control over his behaviour at all. And yeah, it's really annoying for Finn, and sometimes it's embarrassing, but it's not like he's doing it deliberately. Teach some basic strategies like giving their siblings space and explaining their feelings. So I think that's something that we've really sort of learnt to do in our family, that if James is being too much, Finn can go in his bedroom and James isn't allowed in there. And they respect each other's space. Their bedrooms are their own sanctuary areas. Also praise and recognise the efforts that siblings go to sometimes. So when you see behaviour that's encouraging or supportive, you really need to reinforce that and notice it. And this bottom one I think is really, really effective as well, and that's catch your children being good. I think we're very, very often, this happens a lot in schools as well, but often we only comment on behaviour if it's negative and when it goes wrong, and actually we need to get in the habit of commenting and praising the behaviour when it's what we want. So really good example of that is the boys used to share an Xbox, and it used to be in James's bedroom because it's the bigger bedroom, and they'd come home from school and they'd go on the Xbox, and usually we'd have about 45 minutes maximum until it all kicked off, and then they'd start arguing, and then I'd hear, World War III erupt, and usually James screaming, "Get out of my effing bedroom," and all this sort of stuff. And I'd run up there and go, "Oh, no, stop, no, okay, what's going on? Well, he started it, and he's cheating, and I don't want to do this game anymore, I want to play a different game." So I'd usually go, "Right, that's it, I'm just turning it off." "Oh, that's not fair." So it just never had a good outcome. What I started doing was, after 10 or 15 minutes, when they were still playing really nicely, was going up there and saying, "Boys, thank you, you're playing really nicely. Do you know what, you can have an hour today instead of 45 minutes, or here's a packet of Monster Munch each," or whatever it was, but actually catching them doing what I wanted and reinforcing that, so much more effective than waiting for it to go wrong. Something else that you need to offer siblings is empathy. I think there's a big difference between empathy and sympathy, and actually saying sometimes, "Do you know what, I find it really difficult when James does that," or "Yeah, I get embarrassed too when he does that. How about the next time we go out, we give him a bit more space," or "Well, if it starts to bother you, tell me, we can take a break." So actually offering empathy shows that you really, really understand how someone feels, and often with empathy you can offer solutions as well. Encourage activities that the children can do together. As I say, for us it is Xbox, and I know a lot of people are really anti-screens, but it's when my children actually get on really well, the boxing thing or going out and playing football, but something that they can do together can be really, really positive. Use reward systems for all children as well. So this is a question I get asked a lot. I put a lot of positive reinforcement sort of reward systems in place for children who have autism or ADHD, and I'll always say to families, do it for the siblings as well. Why shouldn't they be rewarded for the things that they're doing well? You need to have different targets because they're different children, they're going to have different things, but everyone should be working towards a reward system. A family reward jar can work really well as well. So you just have a jar, and when anybody in the family does something nice for someone else, you put a marble in the jar or pasta in the jar, and when the jar's full, you do something nice as a family. So that could be going out for a meal in a restaurant where you get served very quickly, or having a home cinema experience, or whatever it is, something that everybody appreciates. But then the focus isn't just on the child with ADHD, and it's actually amazing how everybody will start being really, really nice to each other. I've got to tell you something really funny. I'm going to have to swear here. On the other night, my husband is really bad. He swears a lot, and I said to him the day, "Stop! You've got to stop swearing." I said, because I said it's not really a very good example. It said in the children. I said, "If you carry on doing it," I said, "I'm going to set up a swear jar." And this voice came from upstairs. "That's a shite idea." So I haven't done the swear jar. But anyway, I think the family reward jar is really, really nice. It just encourages everybody. Something else that I do quite a lot with families actually is I ban shouting in the house completely, and I ban any form of shouting. So you're not even allowed to shout up the stairs to say dinner's ready or get your shoes on or anything. You just don't shout, and that really can calm the whole family down. And make sure siblings get time with you on your own, even if it's just time to talk. So you just have to, I know you're probably all really busy, I totally sympathise. I run 2 organisations, I've got 2 children, my life is chaotic, but I do always try, even if it's 5 minutes at different bedtimes, just time for them just to have some of me on my own. I think that's really, really important. And this other thing here is love bombing. Have any of you heard of love bombing? No? It's when you basically just prioritise one child, and you just completely not give them everything they want, but it's just all your love and time is kind of dedicated to them for a morning or an afternoon. And I think you have to be very spontaneous sometimes in your affection as well. Sometimes I just go into my kids' room and just, for no reason, just give them a massive hug and cuddle and tell them how much I love them. Sometimes I get told to get off because they're like this, but yeah, I think just be really spontaneous. So something else I think, dealing with behaviour that challenge you as a family, your children with ADHD will have meltdowns sometimes. The siblings will have meltdowns sometimes. I think one of the things that's really helpful to do is to consider those meltdowns or those behaviours as panic attacks. If I said to you, I had a temper tantrum this morning before I drove over to Kingston because I couldn't find my keys and I was running late, you probably think that was a bit sad and I needed to grow up a bit. If I said to you, I had a panic attack this morning before I came over, you'd automatically feel more sympathetic, wouldn't you? So looking at it as a panic attack can be very, very effective. That's one of the things that, again, parents often say is really sort of change their approach to behaviour. Remember that you don't have to do everything as a family unit all the time. It's okay sometimes to split up and actually you can spend more time with one child than the next weekend changing it around. Don't think that you have to be like a commercial where everyone's perfect and everyone's doing everything together. Pick your battles with your children, okay? There are some things that are just not worth fighting over. Sometimes it's easier just to have an easier life, and that's okay. You have to think of the longer term picture. Don't make promises you can't keep or threats that you can't carry out either. I do see this quite a lot with parents. They'll say, if you do that again, you can't go to this party, or I've had parents ring me up saying, oh, I've done something awful, and I've told my child that if they didn't, I don't know, if they've got another detention, I'd ground them this week, and there's a party that they want this weekend, and I don't know what to do. And I say, well, you've got to carry it out, because if you don't, then actually the next time there's a similar situation, the child's not going to buy into it, they're not going to believe you. Flexible boundaries, structure and routine can help manage anxiety a lot. So all children need boundaries. Okay, boundaries is what makes children feel safe, but you can sometimes move those goalposts, and I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that. If your child's behaviour is challenging you, think about why it's challenging you. Okay, is it challenging you because you are feeling tired, or you are feeling stressed with work, or you are feeling embarrassed because you think other people are judging you, which is how I felt on Saturday. So why is behaviour challenging you? We're all challenged different ways. I know that I'm more challenged in the morning when I'm trying to get 2 boys to school, dogs fed, washing on the line before I go to work. I'm less patient than I am on a Sunday morning where everyone's just sort of going with the flow. Take time out to manage your own stress and anxieties. Again, I know you're all really, really busy, but it is stressful sometimes managing a family with a child with ADHD, and I think even if you can just go for a walk, or just to take a bath, or anything, just something that gives you a bit of a break from it all. Remember that you're a role model to your children. I think that's really, really important as well. So another really good example here was that the mornings, I used to find mornings so stressful, and I used to shout at my kids in the morning, come on, we're going to be late, get in the car, and then they'd drive to school, and I would just monologue at them the whole time. Do you know how annoying it is when I have to get up at this one morning and you just lie in bed and you don't do this? And the last thing they would have heard as I'm getting out of the car is me moaning at them and me shouting at them as well. So basically what I was teaching my children was that mornings are stressful. Okay? So years ago now, I made a decision that even though I hate getting up in the morning, that I was just going to get up much, much earlier in the morning. And I just started getting up, and I allow myself now 45 minutes, because I'm a faffer and I'm very easily distracted in the mornings, and I'm on my phone and I just poodle about. So I actually get up now 45 minutes before the children get up, and I'm ready, and then when I wake them up, and actually the mornings are so much less stressful. So what I've done is I've role modelled the fact that mornings aren't stressful anymore, and they're just so much calmer. Make sure if you're going to events or parties or restaurants or anything like that, you've got an exit strategy, and that's for the child with ADHD and for their siblings. If it gets too much and they need a break, make sure they know that that's okay. And it could be that you talk to extended family members and say, look, they might have to go upstairs for a bit, they might have to go in the garden. Make sure that they know that if they need to leave, they can. Often that can lower their anxiety so much that they don't need to, actually. And use scaling systems to help children understand and express their emotions. So have you all heard of a book called The Incredible 5-Point Scale? No, if you haven't, it's an amazing book. I do, it's kind of my Bible for work actually. I do a lot of scaling work. I use a 3-point scale as well, and both my kids have a scale. And basically, if my kids say to me, Mum, I'm on a 3, I know that we need to leave wherever we are. That means I can't cope anymore. If they say, Mum, I'm on a 2, that means they're beginning to feel uncomfortable, or they're not coping so well, and then that kind of puts me on alert. Or if I say to them sometimes, you all right, you're on a 1? They're like, yeah, I'm on a 1, I'm fine. So scaling can be really, really effective because you don't actually have to sort of go into what the emotions mean. They've got this code basically, and that can be really helpful. Just to remember as well that lots of children with autism and ADHD have got a higher than normal level of anxiety. So when my son was diagnosed with ADHD, he was also, the doctor identified that he had a lot of anxiety as well. The bucket on the left here, that picture represents a neurotypical anxiety bucket. It's got little holes in. So if you encounter something that makes you anxious, the anxiety goes in, but because of those holes, it can trickle out. This bucket here is your non-neurotypical bucket. It doesn't have any holes in. So when things go into the bucket that cause stress and anxiety, it just builds up and up and up and up and up, and then eventually it gets full, and that's when you get your meltdown. This is also a good analogy. It's just my boiled kettle analogy. When you come downstairs in the morning and you put your kettle on, how long does it take to boil roughly? 2 minutes. 2 minutes, yeah. Once it's boiled, how long does it take to get back down to room temperature again?
About 2 hours.
Yeah. And what happens once it's boiled if you hit the switch again? Very quick, yeah. So that's a really good analogy to think of. So if your child, your ADHD child, has had a meltdown, or they're very, very anxious, just remember that. And it's the same for any child. So if your sibling is having a difficult time, make sure you're giving them enough time to really calm down. And sometimes introducing them too quickly to the source of the meltdown, which could be each other, it could be the siblings, you're very likely to get a boiling kettle situation again. Right, last little bit then is just on resilience. So this is my resilience tree. Okay, this represents a parent who lives with a child who has a condition such as autism or ADHD. What can you tell me about that tree?
It's flattened.
It's flattened, yes.
Been blown over.
It's been completely blown over, yeah. But what else can you tell me about that tree? It's still alive, yeah. So it's growing in a different direction, but it is still alive, and that's resilience. You're none of us, when we get pregnant with our children, or dads, when you know that your partner's pregnant, none of you think, oh, I hope my child's got a condition. That'll make life interesting and fun. You don't want that, but you know, none of us, we all have to sort of let go of, at some point, of what we thought having a child and our children are going to be like, and we have to grow in a different direction sometimes, but we can do it. Okay. So, just some tips then, if you're, sort of make things a little bit easier in the family, try planning ahead for trips and stuff. If you're going to go to restaurants, make sure it's not a restaurant where you're going to have to wait an hour for each course, because I know that that's a recipe for disaster. Or if you know that you've got long waits, make sure you're taking your iPads, your iPhones, whatever it is that distracts. Remember that you know your family better than anybody else. Okay, so don't be swayed or influenced by the people. You know what's right for your family. Be confident in your abilities. You're doing a brilliant job. I read a brilliant book the other day. It's actually a fiction book, but it was the parent in this book said, there's no such thing as a perfect parent. We're all just winging it. And we are. We're all just winging it. Just do your best, because your best will always be good enough. You'll have good days and bad days. Focus on what went well and view mistakes as learning opportunities. We all make mistakes. I make mistakes. I coach other parents on parenting, but I make mistakes. I'm not a perfect parent, because there is no such thing. As I said earlier, pick your battles. Facts are worth more than opinions. I think that's a really important thing to remember. It doesn't actually matter what other people's opinions are about your children or your parenting. It's the facts that are really, really important. Trust your instincts. Go with your instincts. Your instincts as a parent are pretty much always right. Maybe not immediately, but usually you'll see in the end that you were right. And my favourite quote is, remember it'll be all right in the end, and if it's not all right, it's not the end yet. Okay, being a parent is a journey, isn't it? And you're going to be on that journey for a very, very long time. Support, I think, as I say, Alistair, you've given us loads of support earlier. And there's some really good videos on autism and ADHD actually on YouTube. I think that's a really accessible thing for siblings to be able to watch actually. My children love looking at videos. That's probably a more accessible way for them to access that information sometimes. Right, thank you for listening, and time for questions.